During this series, our goal is to better understand dissonant rhythmic subdivisions and how they can be made more accessible on the drum set. This video will explain how the content from part 1 and 2 of this series can be applied to the drum set. Before we begin, let's review. We are working with the 4/4 time signature. We will be building our rhythms on the beats, not pulses. The selected subdivisions are from 1 to 12, and the chord durations that we are working with are the quarter note, half note, and whole note. We are pairing dissimilar rhythms to create polyrhythms. We combined our 12 subdivisions to one another, and we went through how the subdivisions interact with the chord durations. In this video, we will first introduce some of the various ways in which musical context can affect our rhythms. Next, we will discuss the notation that will be used. And finally, the use of the hands and feet will be briefly outlined. To begin with, it is important to note that there are many factors that affect the quality of a rhythm, its complexity, and therefore its accessibility. Unfortunately, there are far too many parameters to accurately control within the scope of this study, so I have outlined a list of factors that will be accounted for during the workshops. Some of these factors may be already set within a piece of music, while others may be creatively manipulated. It is for this reason that no boundaries have been set. One area that we can investigate, however, is notation. For now, we will only be using the snare drum, bass drum, and hi-hat. The snare drum will be played with the hands, the kick with the right foot, and the hi-hat with the left foot. If you are a left-handed player, just swap the feet and lead each example with your dominant hand. With that in mind, there will be exercises with suggested sticking patterns. We will now start with the simplest concept involving the hands and gradually build from there. Naturally, we begin with the original set of 12 subdivisions. Playing these subdivisions in the duration of one quarter note means that there are no sounding polyrhythms or restrictions in terms of counting the beats. This allows us to build on previous experience or any relatable knowledge that we may have about how to interpret each subdivision. The next step is to introduce the other chord durations, being the half note and the whole note. As discussed in part 2 of this series, each polyrhythm involves subdivisions 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 being paired with 2 or 4. As a starting point, and to make this as clear as possible, we will begin by directly attaching our subdivision of 2 to the duration of the half note by using a bar of 2/4. The subdivision of 4 will be directly attached to the duration of the whole note by using one bar of 4/4. So let's begin with the groupings that have 2 as the natural subdivision. We have the time signature, which provides us with 2 beats per bar. Then we superimpose the set of 12 subdivisions over the top, and this is what the result is. We can now see the first set of polyrhythms is being highlighted in green. All of these polyrhythms have the same intrinsic relationship to the subdivision of 2, and that is why these are grouped together. Now we can move on to the slightly more intricate group that have 4 as the natural subdivision. The same process is used to produce this set of rhythms, and much like before, the polyrhythms that are created have unifying characteristics. By this stage, we have covered all of the information necessary to perform the full rhythm scale with the hands. Next, we will introduce foot ostinatos into the mix. For these examples, we will need to refer to the original set of 12 subdivisions and the natural subdivisions of 1, 2, and 4. The feet play a very supportive role in the first stages of this study and have been made to be as basic as possible. So, when we have a subdivision from 1 to 12 over 1, there are 3 foot ostinato options. When there is a subdivision from 1 to 12 over 2, there are 6 suggested options for foot ostinatos. And when there is a subdivision from 1 to 12 over 4, there are also 6 suggested foot ostinato patterns. Now, let's combine the hands and feet. Our time signature will always be 4/4. For the first example, let's select the chord duration of a quarter note and the natural subdivision of 1. To keep things simple, we will pick option 1 for the foot ostinato, and let's select the upper subdivision of 3. The selected options result in a bar that looks like this. Next, let's pick the half note duration, the natural subdivision of 2, and the first foot ostinato option, and the upper subdivision of 4. These parameters result in a bar that looks like this. For the last example, we will have the duration of a whole note, the natural subdivision of 4, option 1 for the foot ostinato, and the upper subdivision will be 5. These parameters result in a bar that looks like this. To conclude, there are a number of different factors that can be creatively manipulated, like tempo and dynamics. There is a clear format for notation. The context of how the hands are used has been defined in its simplest form. We explored the basics of the foot ostinatos, and finally, we combined the hands and feet.